hot technology news from the world of used book selling, which is something I don't get to say very often. About 2 weeks ago, my family noticed something weird was happening with our online sales. Now, used booksellers all across the world have noticed the same thing. Let me start with why I might be credible. My family has a used bookstore in Houston, Texas. Between our store and a warehouse, we have about 500,000 books. I am also an AI entrepreneur, not in the way that you think about it normally. It has to do with the bookstore. I'm building an AI tool that helps used booksellers rapidly identify and catalog their books. I'm not scanning whole books into an AI, which is an important distinction. If you're a used bookseller, the way you sell books online is you can open your own website, you can sell them through Instagram or TikTok, or you go and you list your books on other marketplaces where people can buy your books. The biggest one is obviously Amazon. There are others that are smaller and slower. On the slowest one that we use, where we make the least sales, we noticed we were selling 20 times the rate we normally do. When I looked into it, we were actually selling about 95% of these to a single buyer who's having them shipped somewhere else. We paused because we didn't really know what was going on. I'll get more into that in a minute. About a week later, I noticed that on bookseller subreddits and Amazon seller forums and on Twitter and all over the place, other people were talking about the same thing happening. I'm not going to comment if it was the same buyer or who the buyer was or where they're sending it because I don't want to break any terms of service for the websites I'm on. I can just tell you that our experience roughly resembles theirs. What a lot of people are noticing who are selling used books are that these books are going in larger than normal size shipments. They're strange books like The Insider's Guide to Metro Denver from 1995 or How to Use Corel WordPerfect 1991. Just old books people are never normally buying. Dead inventory, in other words. They're all being bought by one company and shipped to another place. Most people think that this is like an AI company play. Like an AI company is buying all these books to scan them and train the data. I actually think it's something a little bit more mundane. I'm not certain. If we look at the books that are being bought, I can tell you from our experience, the reason we shut it down is because most of our orders in the last 25 years we've been selling online are one book, one buyer. You may sometimes get someone to buy a set or someone to buy 2 or 3 books. More than that is kind of crazy. In the last week, since we've been selling at a higher volume, all of the orders have been bigger than 2 or 3. We paused when we got a 70-book order. This is crazy. It was so unprecedented, we actually had to call the smaller, slower platform that we're on and say, how do we ship this? Because you only give us space for one tracking number. All these books won't even fit into our biggest box. They reached out and they helped us with that. When we did the research on which books we're selling, obviously it was obscure books, not necessarily rare. These were all books that were listed on the slower platform, but not listed on Amazon. If you go and find them, they're not on Amazon. Or they're books where they were listed on the slower platform for one price we had. On Amazon, they're not common. They're selling for 5, 10, 20 times what we had them listed on. There's 2 possibilities. Either it's an AI company or it's just simple financial arbitrage. Because if what we notice is the same for everyone who's selling these books, at least most of the time, if I'm that company that's buying all these books, that's just a financial decision. They are just sending the money out, purchasing these books. For them, it's just a number. And then the books are getting sent to another company. What happens at that other company requires a little bit of explanation. If you're a used bookseller, then you have 2 options for listing a book on Amazon. You can do what's called fulfillment by merchant, which means when someone places an order, you grab the book, put it in an envelope, and then you send it out to the person who bought it. Or you can do fulfillment by Amazon, which means you take all your books, label them appropriately, put them into a box, send that box to Amazon, who stores them on a shelf, and when someone orders it, Amazon fulfills that order. Fulfillment by Amazon, or FBA, gets you some perks, like you can participate in Prime and other things. Fulfillment by merchant has other perks that are mostly operational and too detailed to explain right now. The company that was ordering these books is sending them to FBA prep companies for the most part, from what I've seen online. I'm not getting into what happened with us. Again, if I'm the person buying all these books, then what happens is I buy the book online, not knowing what it is, probably using some algorithm that's comparing platforms or looking at price or number of copies available. I'm sending those books to an FBA prep center. So I am never touching the book. The money's just coming in. It kind of goes against what we believe in as booksellers. Books are not simply a commodity. You have to commodify them a little bit to make it in the used book business unless you're doing extremely high-end antiquarian sales. The spirit of the project I'm doing with AI is basically to create a more permanent metadata at a higher quality for each of these rare books that we're selling. If we were to continue just kind of like going through and selling thousands and thousands of books into this black hole where someone's buying them, sending them direct to FBA, we don't know what's happening with that book. We also don't know what's going to happen if it doesn't sell on FBA in a year or 2. If we really do have the last copies of some of these books, we're sending them into this portal from which they may not come back. that may be lost forever. You might say, aren't all the books you sell lost forever? Technically, every book we sell is lost forever to a customer. That's good. That's why we exist, to sell books. When I got the funding for this project, we are experiencing a second burning of the library at Alexandria. What it means is that we're losing a lot of books because everyone thinks that everything is really well preserved and organized on the internet. If you want a classic book, you want just the text, there are really great resources like Project Gutenberg. There are a lot of librarians really working hard across the world to preserve books. Our digital infrastructure is not as sophisticated as we think it is for preserving the metadata of these books. We're losing a lot of these details. A lot of ebook platforms, even from like 10, 20 years ago, were shuttered. A lot of the exclusive books on those platforms were disappeared and never heard from again. It's happening at mid-list and antique books at a much higher rate than people realize because they assume that once something is on the internet, it's preserved. They don't think about the fact that somebody has to pay to host that data and to preserve that book. While we're not scanning full books for preservation, the tool I'm developing at least is going to give us a map of what's out there and what we might be missing and what we stand to lose. If you're curious about that, or if you want to hear more about this, I am researching. I've reached out to a few people to interview them about this story. I'll be putting it on my Substack, where you can see, and pretty much every time I write about it on my Substack, I'll also make a video about it, so you can follow me here or there. Do you think this matters? Do you think it matters what happens to the books after someone buys it? Do you think it matters if it's going into an AI project versus just financial arbitrage? Or do you have some kind of story or evidence that something else is happening that might be more or less interesting than what I proposed? I'd love to hear from you.